They chose prudence because she would not enjoy it, which the Amberley family considered a qualification. "You will be plain, and you will be brief," said her mother, in the carriage, for the 4th time. "You will thank His Grace for the very great honor, you will convey your sister's most sincere regret, and you will not embroider." Beatrice would embroider. Cassandra would weep. "You will simply deliver it." Lady Amberley adjusted her gloves. "It is the one thing you have ever been suited to, Prudence, being the one who is not noticed. Do not, for once in your life, find a way to spoil it." Prudence Amberley, who was 23 and had spent the whole of those years being the one who is not noticed, looked out of the carriage window at the approaching bulk of Ravensmead and said, "Yes, Mamma," which was what she said to nearly everything, and which had long ago been mistaken by her whole family for the sum of what she thought. The errand was this. The Duke of Ravensmead had, 3 weeks before, made an offer of marriage for the eldest Amberley daughter, Beatrice, the beauty, the one the family had spent a fortune presenting, and Beatrice had, to her family's horror and her own private triumph, already secretly promised herself to a cavalry captain with good shoulders and no money, and would not have the Duke at any price. The refusal had to be delivered. It had to be delivered in person, because the offer had been made in person, and a family that returns a Duke's proposal by the 2nd post has insulted him twice. But it could not be delivered by Beatrice, who would look as though she were gloating, or by Lady Amberley, who would look as though she were negotiating, or by Cassandra, the middle sister, who cried at everything and would give the whole game away. So they sent Prudence, the quiet one, the plain one, the one who would go into the great cold house, say 11 words, and come out again, having made no impression on anybody, and least of all on the Duke of Ravensmead, who was known through 3 counties to be the most exacting man in England, and to have never, in 9 years, been observed to look at anything twice. He looked at her 3 times before she had finished her first sentence. The first time was when she came into the library, because he had expected the mother, and got, instead, a young woman in a brown pelisse who came through the door without any of the small performances he had learnt to see coming. No pause on the threshold to be admired, no glance up under the lashes, no arrangement of the skirts. She simply came in, and stopped at a correct distance, and waited to be addressed, and Marcus Thorne, 9th Duke of Ravensmead, looked up from the letter he was pretending to read, and found that he had lost his place in it entirely. The second time was when she spoke, because her voice was low and even, and came out without a single tremor, and it had been a very long time since anybody had spoken to the Duke of Ravensmead without a tremor. "Your Grace, I am Prudence Amberley. I have come on my sister Beatrice's behalf." She did not sit, because she had not been asked to sit. "My sister is deeply sensible of the honor you have done her, and she has asked me to convey to you her sincere regret that she is not able to accept it. I am sorry to be the bearer of a disappointment. I will not take up more of your time than the message requires." 11 words of the message, near enough, delivered exactly as instructed, and she turned to go. And the 3rd time the Duke of Ravensmead looked at her was when she turned to go. Because in 9 years of receiving what he wanted and being flattered by people who wanted something back, no one had ever, upon delivering him unwelcome news, simply turned and made to leave without waiting to see how he took it. "Miss Amberley." She stopped. "Your Grace, sit down. I was instructed not to take up your time, Your Grace. The message is delivered." "You were instructed by your mother," said the Duke, and watched the small, still surprise go across her face at being read so exactly. "And your mother is not here, and I find I would like you to sit down, because in the space of 1 minute you have done 3 things that no one has done in this room in 9 years. And I am a curious man, and I should like to know who you are before you go." Prudence Amberley sat down, because a duke had asked her to, and because, though she would not have admitted it under torture, no one in 23 years had ever said out loud that she had done anything at all. They talked for 40 minutes, which the household noticed, because the Duke of Ravensmead did not talk for 40 minutes. He asked her name again, and she gave it, and he said it was a heavy name to hang on a child, and she said that her mother had named all 3 daughters for virtues, and had run out of the pretty ones by the time she got to the 3rd, and that Prudence was what was left after Grace and Charity had already gone to cousins. She said it without any bid for sympathy, as a plain fact she had made her peace with, and the Duke of Ravensmead, who had been named for an emperor and had spent his life being crushed under the weight of it, laughed, out loud, alone in his own library, which his valet, passing the door, stopped dead to hear. He asked her about the estate she had grown up on, and discovered she knew it. The actual working of it, the drainage and the tenants, and the price of wheat, because she was the daughter nobody minded doing the accounts, the one handed the ledgers, because Beatrice must not spoil her hands, and Cassandra could not add. He asked her a question about a mortgage to see whether she truly understood it, and she answered it better than his own agent would have, and then she said, "You are testing me, Your Grace, and I do not mind it, but I should tell you that I have been tested by experts. My mother has been finding out what I am not good for since I was 6. There is very little you can ask that has not already been used against me. That is a hard thing to say lightly. I do not say it lightly. I say it plainly. I have found the two are often mistaken for each other by people who are not listening." She looked at him steadily. "You are listening, which I did not expect, and which I do not entirely know what to do with, so I have been saying more than I meant to. I think I had better go, Your Grace, before I say the rest of it." "What is the rest of it?" "That I do not think you are cold at all," said Prudence Amberley, standing, "and that I think a great many people have decided you are, the way a great many people have decided I am simple, and that both of us have found it easier to let them. Good day, Your Grace. My sister will be very glad the message is delivered." She went, and the Duke of Ravensmead sat in his library for an hour after the Amberley carriage had gone, and did not read one word of the letter in his hand. His valet, a discreet man named Hobbs, who had dressed him for 9 years and formed opinions he was never asked for, came in at last to see whether his Grace wanted the fire made up, and found the Duke sitting exactly where the interview had left him. "The young lady has gone, Your Grace." "I know she has gone, Hobbs. I was here." The Duke did not look up. "Do you know what she did?" "She came to refuse me on her sister's behalf, and she delivered the refusal. And then she turned to leave, without waiting to be dismissed, and without waiting to see whether I minded. In 9 years no one has left this room without first making certain I was not displeased. She did not care whether I was displeased. She had said her true thing, and she was going home. Very singular, Your Grace. It is the least singular thing about her, which is what I cannot get past." The Duke finally set the letter down. "She told me I was not cold. To my face. In this room, and then she apologized for saying more than she meant to, as though the honesty were the fault and not the gift." He was quiet a moment. "Make up the fire, Hobbs. I am going to sit here a while longer and be a fool about it, and I would as soon be warm while I do it." Hobbs made up the fire and said nothing, and reported to the housekeeper that evening that his Grace had been struck by lightning and did not yet know it, which the housekeeper, who had also glimpsed the young lady in the brown pelisse, did not find in the least difficult to believe. He came to Amberley Court at 11 the next morning, which threw the household into a condition close to panic, because a duke does not call the morning after his proposal has been refused, and there is no rule of etiquette that covers what he might want. Lady Amberley received him in the good drawing-room, with Beatrice arranged decoratively by the window, in case he had, against all sense, changed his mind, and Cassandra ready to weep, and Prudence sent to the still room, because Prudence was not a daughter one displayed to a duke. "Your Grace does us great honor," said Lady Amberley. "If there has been any doubt about the message my daughter Prudence conveyed, there has been no doubt at all," said the Duke of Ravensmead. "Miss Beatrice conveyed her refusal with perfect clarity, and I accept it entirely, and I wish her very happy with her captain." The room went silent. Nobody had told the Duke of Ravensmead about the captain. "I make it my business," said the Duke, into the silence, "to know why I am refused. It is a habit that has saved me a great deal of foolishness over the years. Miss Beatrice's heart is engaged elsewhere, and I honor her for following it, and I would not have her on any terms now if she came to me on her knees, which I trust relieves everyone in this room." He set down his hat. "I have not come about Miss Beatrice. I have come to ask whether I might speak with your third daughter." Lady Amberley's face performed a small, complicated tragedy. "Prudence," she said. "Your Grace wishes to speak with Prudence." "I do. Prudence is—" Lady Amberley reached for a reason and found, to her visible alarm, that there was not a single thing wrong with Prudence that could be said aloud to a duke. "Prudence is in the still room, Your Grace. She is not dressed for— I have seen Miss Prudence dressed for delivering unwelcome news in a brown pelisse," said the Duke, "and I found her the most interesting person I have spoken to in 9 years, and I do not require her to change her gown on my account. May I see her, or may I not?" They fetched her from the still room, with her sleeves still turned back and lavender on her hands, and she came into the drawing-room exactly as she had come into the library the day before, without performance, at a correct distance, waiting, and she looked at her mother's stricken face and her sister's astonished one, and the Duke of Ravensmead standing in the middle of it, and she understood, with the quickness her family had never once credited her with, most of what had happened. "Your Grace," she said, "you did not need to come all this way to tell me the message was properly received. A note would have done. I did not come about the message." "No," Prudence agreed. "I begin to see that. My mother has gone the color of the curtains, which she only does when the world is not behaving as she has arranged it." She did not smile. "Quite. You had better say what you have come to say, Your Grace, and let her recover." And the Duke of Ravensmead, in front of Lady Amberley and Beatrice and a Cassandra who had already begun to cry on general principle, said, "I came to ask you to marry me. Not as a substitute for your sister, I want that said plainly, in front of your family, so that no one in this house may ever tell you otherwise. I offered for your sister 3 weeks ago because she was pointed out to me as the suitable Amberley daughter, and I was tired of being asked when I would choose one, and it was a cold, sensible, stupid thing to do. And I am glad past all measure that she refused me, because it sent the wrong daughter to my library, and the wrong daughter was the only one worth crossing a room for." There was a sound from Lady Amberley that did not form itself into a word. "I have known you one afternoon," the Duke went on, "and I am not going to insult you by calling it love, because you would see straight through it and think the less of me. I am going to call it what it is. In one afternoon you told me more true things than I have heard in 9 years, and you did it without wanting anything from me, and I have not slept, and I have come to find out whether the woman who told me I was not cold might be persuaded to spend some years proving it. That is the whole of my offer, Miss Amberley. It is not romantic. I understand you prefer plain to romantic." Prudence Amberley stood very still in the middle of her mother's drawing-room. "You must give me leave to say something you will not like," she said, "in front of my family, because they are the reason I have to say it." "Say it." "You have just told this room that I am worth crossing a room for. You are the first person who has ever said such a thing in my hearing, and I want you to understand what that does to a woman who has been the plain, quiet, useful one for 23 years, It is very like being handed water in a desert, your grace. And a woman handed water in a desert will agree to almost anything and will not be able afterward to tell whether she wanted the man or only the water. The Duke did not move. "So I am not going to say yes this morning," said Prudence. "Not because I do not want to. Because I want to too much, and for reasons that are not entirely about you. And I have watched what happens to women who marry to escape a house. My sister Cassandra nearly did it last year, and I talked her out of it. And I am not going to do the thing I stopped her doing." Her voice did not shake. "If you meant it, if it is me and not the novelty of a woman who did not flatter you, then it will still be true in the spring. Come back in the spring, Your Grace. Court me properly, in the ordinary way, calls and letters and all of it, in the sight of everybody, and let me find out whether I want the man in a season when I am not standing in a desert. If you will not do that, then it was the novelty, and we have both been spared." The Duke of Ravensmead looked at her for a long moment, and then he did the thing that decided her, though it would be spring before she admitted it. He bowed, to her, correctly, at the depth owed an equal, and he said, "That is the wisest answer I have ever been given to anything, and I would be a fool to argue with the one quality your mother actually named you for." "Prudence, Your Grace," said Prudence. "You may as well say it. Everybody uses it against me by the end, and you are only being polite by saving it up. I was not saving it to use against you. I was saving it because it is the only true thing your mother ever gave you, whatever she meant by it, and I did not want to spend it lightly." He said it plainly, without weight, and watched it land in her all the same. "I will come back in the spring. May I write in the meantime?" "You may write. Then I will write badly," said the Duke, "and often." And he took up his hat, and he left Amberley Court, having asked the quiet sister to marry him twice in 2 days, and having been told, both times, no, and having been, both times, more certain than before. The letters came all winter, and they were the making of the whole thing. Because a man cannot perform charm across 4 months of correspondence, he runs out of it, and what is left is who he is. What was left, Prudence found, was a man very like herself, exact, dry, easily bored by nonsense, and lonelier than he had ever let a living soul see. He wrote to her about the estate, and about his tenants, and about a book they were both reading and disagreeing over, and once, in December, about his father, who had been a cold man in earnest, the genuine article, and who had taught his son that warmth was a weakness that people used against you, and that a duke who let himself be known let himself be ruined. "I have believed that for 9 years," he wrote, "and I did not know I believed it until a woman in a brown pelisse told me I was not cold, and I found I wanted, more than I have wanted anything, for her to be right." Prudence read that letter 4 times, and then went out into the frozen kitchen garden, and stood in it, until she could breathe. Because she had spent her own life being told the opposite thing, that she was too plain to be wanted, where he had been told he was too cold to be loved, and she understood that they had been raised by the same lie, wearing 2 different faces. She wrote back that night, and she did not soften it, because softening was the one thing she had never learnt, and was not going to learn for a duke. "Your father was wrong," she wrote, "and I say it plainly because you will not believe it if I say it kindly. Warmth is not a weakness that people use against you. It is the only thing you have got that is actually yours. The title is your grandfather's, and the house is entailed, and the money came with both. And the one thing in the whole of Ravensmead that belongs to you and to no one before you is whatever you feel and are brave enough to show. Your father taught you to guard the one possession you were free to give away. I do not wonder you are tired. I have been guarding the same thing for the opposite reason. And I am tired too, and I think two tired people who have finally stopped guarding it might do very well, if one of them can be persuaded to stop listening to a dead man in the spring. She read it over once, and very nearly did not send it, because it was the boldest thing she had ever written to anybody. Then she thought of him sitting in that great cold library, being crushed under an emperor's name, and she sealed it, and she sent it, and the Duke of Ravensmead read it in the first week of January, and carried it in his breast pocket, until the paper wore soft at the folds. The trouble came from inside the house, as trouble at Amberley always did, and it wore Lady Amberley's face. It had begun in December, in fact before the letter, with the intercepting. Lady Amberley had decided, once the shock wore off, that a courtship conducted by post over her own head would not do, and she had given orders that the Ravensmead letters were to be brought to her before they were brought to Prudence, so that she might see what was being said and, where she judged it wise, improve upon the replies. For 3 weeks she read her daughter's correspondence before her daughter did, and once she had held back a letter of the Duke's for 2 days while she considered whether its tone was warm enough to be encouraged or cool enough to be worried about. And Prudence had gone quietly frantic in those 2 days and said nothing, because she did not yet know the letter existed to be missed. Prudence caught her at it in the first week of January, by the simple accident of being in the hall when the post came. And she did not make a scene. She said only, "Those are mine, Mama," and took them, and from that day she met the carrier herself at the gate every morning, 11 weeks running, in all weathers, which her mother took for eccentricity, and which was in fact the quiet, absolute refusal of a woman who had learnt that the only way to keep a thing at Amberley was to stand between it and her mother's hands. It was because Lady Amberley could no longer reach the incoming letters that she resorted, in February, to writing one of her own. By the new year she had arrived at a position of great enthusiasm, because a duke in the family was a duke in the family, whichever daughter he took, and Lady Amberley had begun to speak of the match as though she had arranged it, and to manage it, and to write to the Duke herself, over Prudence's head, in terms that made Prudence's stomach turn. And in February, discovering that the Duke meant to wait until spring and court in the ordinary way, Lady Amberley decided to hurry him, because a long courtship gives a man time to change his mind. And she did the one thing calculated to do the most harm. She wrote to the Duke of Ravensmead that Prudence's affections were now so entirely engaged that the family feared for her health if the matter were long delayed, and that a spring wedding, or even a winter one, would be a mercy, and she signed it as though it came with Prudence's knowledge, and it did not. The Duke read it in the 3rd week of February, and he was a man who had been taught by his father that people who want something from you will lie to get it, and the old lesson rose up in him exactly where it always had, and for 11 days he did not write. Prudence knew the letters had stopped before she knew why. She had come, over the winter, to measure her weeks by them, and when 2 went by with nothing she went first cold and then, being who she was, methodical. She did not weep, and she did not wonder. She went to her mother's writing desk, because her mother was the variable in every equation at Amberley, and she found the blotter, and on the blotter, reversed, in her mother's hand, the ghost of the words fear for her health, and long delayed and spring wedding, and she understood the whole of it in about 4 seconds. She did not confront her mother. She had learnt, over 23 years, that confronting her mother only taught her mother to hide things better. She ordered the gig, and she drove herself the 11 miles to Ravensmead, alone, in February, which no unmarried woman did, and she did not care, because she had spent a winter discovering that she was worth crossing a room for, and she was not going to lose it to a letter she had not written. He received her because he could not do otherwise. And he was, she saw at once, in a bad way, pale and stiff and braced. A man who had spent 11 days climbing back inside the armor it had taken him 9 years to build and 1 afternoon to take off. "You have had a letter," said Prudence, before he could arrange his face, "from my mother, in February, telling you that I am pining, and that you must marry me soon for my health, as though I had asked her to write it." She set her gloves down on his own table. "I did not ask her to write it. I did not know she had written it until an hour ago, when I read it backwards off her blotter, and I have driven 11 miles in an open gig to tell you so to your face, because I will not lose a thing I want to a lie my mother told, and I would rather be ruined driving here than sit at home being managed." The Duke of Ravensmead looked at her. "My father told me," he said slowly, "that everyone who comes near a great house comes for what the house can give them, and that the ones who say they love you are the ones lying hardest. And I read your mother's letter, and I heard his voice. And I have spent 11 days being the man he made instead of the man your letters made." "I know," said Prudence. "I read your December letter. I know exactly which voice you have been listening to. That is why I came instead of writing, because a letter can be forged. Your Grace, my mother has just proved it. And I could not forge myself standing in your library in a temper, having ruined my own reputation on the road to get here." Her voice caught for the first time. "I told you in the autumn that I would not marry you to escape a house. I have just driven out of that house alone in an open gig in February to tell you the truth. I think that answers, rather completely, the question of whether it is you or the escape." He crossed the room to her, and he did not perform it, and it was the plainest walk across a room a man ever took. "Marry me," said the Duke of Ravensmead, "in the spring, as you asked, courted properly, in the sight of everybody, so that no one may ever say I hurried you, or bought you, or took you as second to your sister. I will wait the whole season if you tell me to. But I am asking you now, standing here with your mother's lie on the table between us, because I want it to be the true thing that answers the false one, and I want you to be the one who said yes to it in your own words, in your own temper, and not a woman anybody wrote a letter about." Prudence Amberley, who had been sent to that house to make no impression, and had made the only one that ever mattered, put her hand in his. "Yes," she said, "in the spring. And you will go on writing to me until then, badly and often, because I have got used to it, and if you ever again let your father's voice speak louder than mine, you will find I drive a very fast gig." "I have noticed," said the Duke, and for the second time in his life he laughed out loud in a room where somebody could hear him, and this time the somebody was her. They were married in May at Amberley and courted properly the whole spring between. Calls and letters and public walks, in the sight of the entire county, so that not one soul could say the Duke of Ravensmead had taken the plain Amberley girl in a hurry or on the rebound, or by anybody's arrangement but their own. Lady Amberley was not forgiven quickly, but she was, in time, forgiven, because Prudence had discovered in her own happiness a thing her mother had never had, which was security enough to be generous, and because the Duke had said one dry sentence on the subject that settled it, that Lady Amberley's letter had been the worst thing anyone had done to him in 9 years, and also the thing that sent Prudence 11 miles in an open gig to save him from himself, and that on the whole he found he could not entirely regret a lie that had produced that particular truth. Beatrice married her captain and was happy and poor and glad of it, and the 2 sisters, who had spent 23 years being the beauty and the plain one, discovered once the ranking no longer mattered that they liked each other very much, and wrote every week for the rest of their lives. Cassandra stopped crying at everything, having watched her plain sister become a duchess by the simple method of telling the truth, and concluded there might be something in it, and grew, over the following years, into the sharpest-tongued of the three, which nobody had seen coming and everybody came to enjoy. And Prudence, who had gone into that house to make no impression, made, in the end, the only kind that lasts. For she became known through the same 3 counties that had called the Duke of Ravensmead cold as the one person alive who could make him laugh in a room full of people. And there were those who said the Duke had thawed. And there were others, closer, who understood that he had never been frozen at all, only guarded, and that a quiet woman in a brown pelisse had walked into his library one afternoon and, without in the least meaning to, set down the guard he had carried since he was a boy, simply by refusing to be impressed by it. There is a brown pelisse kept in a cedar press at Ravensmead, which the Duchess would never let be given away, though she owned a great many finer things by then. Her husband asked her once why she kept it, an old plain travelling coat with lavender still in the seams, and Prudence, Duchess of Ravensmead, who had been sent to that house to be the daughter no one would look at twice, said, "Because I was wearing it the first time in my life that anybody looked at me at all. My family dressed my sisters for you and sent me in the coat I did the accounts in, because I was not meant to be seen. And you saw me. You saw me in the one garment in the world that was chosen to make certain no one would." She folded it back into the press. "I keep it to remember that the thing they sent to make me invisible was the thing you noticed me in. There is a lesson in that, Marcus, and I have never once been able to decide whether it is about you or about them." "It is about neither," said the Duke of Ravensmead, who had learnt, over the years of their marriage, to say the warm thing out loud in the room, where she could hear it. "It is about you. They sent the coat. Anyone can send a coat. You were the one who walked into the library in it and turned around to leave without waiting to see how I took the news. And that was not the coat, Prudence. That was never the coat. That was the only interesting thing that has happened to me in my life. And it walked in wearing brown, and it very nearly walked out again before I had the sense to say your name.